What's going on? Welcome to ednews.com. It's your host, EJ Carrion, and today we have a special guest, Corey Winchester, a high school teacher out in Evanston, Illinois, and also a Ph.D. student at Northwestern. And Corey just did an article in EdSurge.com last month titled, Teachers Are Tired, Educators Are Tired. We need to start looking at, it's time to dream new possibilities into our schools. He did this in December. We read the article. We were really excited to connect. So let's just bring Corey on to Ed News right now in the studio and say hello. All right. So, Corey, welcome to ednews.com. I would just love to know, it's a new semester. You probably was writing a lot about kind of just what was going on last semester in this article. What kind of has changed or matured since posting this on EdSurge?
Yeah, so I gotta say that this particular piece was months in the making. And I think a lot of it was inspired by what I had experienced as an educator um, during the 2020 and 2021 school year. I guess even starting, a couple of months before that. But it was really a reflective piece. And I also think it was a call to action for us to really think about the context for what it means to be in education, to serve as public school teachers, and the types of support, the types of dreaming, the types of changes, the types of reimagining, the types of revolutionary action that needs to take place in our educational systems. And so, that piece was really me pouring a bit of my heart and soul and lived experience on paper, and also, um, bearing witness to what's been happening in our nation, particularly for educators who have been really tasked with um, doing a lot with very little. And that's something that we've been doing historically. And it's not sustainable. It hasn't been sustainable. And we aren't, in a position to really shift that right now. And so part of this is like, how can we dream?
Yeah. Yeah. I know you said you're getting a PhD. What's the PhD in and what's like your long-term aspirations?
Yeah, so currently I'm a PhD student in my first year, technically, at Northwestern University in learning sciences. And so I think it's a program and a field that really um, brings folks together to think about how we can be stewards of learning environments in ways that are generative, in ways that honor our humanity,
Mhm.
and in ways that give us space to imagine what has yet to be done.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing that excites me about being a learning scientist, and exploring how folks learn in different settings, right? And we learn our entire lives. It's not just in school, in
Mhm.
our history classes, in our discipline specific environments. And so I think that's something that I want folks to know about what learning sciences contribute, not just to the field of education, but to how we live our lives, day to day.
You have a quote in here that, they kind of highlighted and it said, I thought if other black boys had teachers that cared for them and loved for them the way some of my teachers did, they too would succeed. I believe in an education system that would help students embody their full human potential. I thought teaching and our school systems were sustainable. Um, as a black educator, male black educator, um, what are some things you see that uh, your black boys need, and what does reimagining school look like for them?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. Um, so I think we first got to recognize and acknowledge that our school systems have not been set up for success. Um, I am a firm believer in the research that folks have generated before me that I carry now. There are people like Dr. Bettina Love, who was a transformational educator,
Mm,
who wrote about how education systems have been set up for survival. And that's what folks have been doing for generations. Um, Black students, Black men, Black boys, queer Black boys, like myself, um, I think we would all benefit from spaces that um, really love us and love on us
mhm,
hard. And I know that sounds like something that feels like this nebulous thing. You know, it's not a check on the box that a lot of folks tend to look for. But at the end of the day, what our work is relational, right?
mhm,
And I think we want to know that when I say we, I'm talking about Black boys, Black male identifying students. What we need is people to invest in our futures, right? To see us as fully human, to see the potential, right? It's the potential that I think my ancestors saw, even as they faced the most horrific conditions um, under systems of oppression in the United States, like historically. But they were ones that were dreaming that their generations, those that came after, would be able to thrive in ways that they had not. Had they not had that
mhm,
imagination, then I don't know where I'd be.
mhm,
Um, Charlene Carruthers, wrote a book called Unapologetic, a Black queer feminist mandate for radical movements. And in it, she talks about how the Black imagination has been crushed violently, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Bettina Love refers to it as spirit murdering,
mhm,
right? These are intangible things that we can't touch. But the moment that we're able to address them and say, hey, I see your full humanity, right? I see the potential that you have. Let's talk about what's possible. And I feel like we have space to do much more than what we've been relegated to.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it seems we're going through a moment in school where the hunger for freedom, flexibility for students and taking ownership of their learning and for teachers to take control of their teaching. And so what are some key trends that you're seeing in your first year of PhD school and then also among your colleagues that if there's a system leader, district leader or a state leader or federal leader out there who is looking to get something right, what are the trends that you're wanting them to be aware of and that they need to take seriously?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really interesting question because I don't necessarily know if it's about trends or like this new hot
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
that comes and goes in
Yeah.
the ed world, but it's more so about a change of heart and a change of mind because those actions are what we need to actually shift how folks relate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a couple of folks that have really inspired me to think very differently about this work. And I have to shout out two of my advisors, Shireen Vasuki and Megan Bang, both doctors,
Mm-hmm.
because they have, um, and this is in community of folks who are thinking, critically in um, towards futures of possibility. But I feel like they've really inspired me to think about how we relate. What are those relational practices
Mm-hmm.
that we're employing when we talk to one another? Um, a lot of teaching like happens on the fly. This is not necessarily something that you can
Mm-hmm.
just, read in a book and say, okay, I'm going to do this in this particular, situation, circumstance. One of the things that I think is a talent, is a difficult talent, right? I have, in a given year, 100 to 150 students whose lives I become a part of. And how we build community with one another is, important, but
Mm,
they all show up every day, given who they are in that particular moment. And that's where I need to meet them.
mm,
Um, but we don't necessarily have the types of supports around to really, imagine how young folks can really thrive in their learning. Um, so it's a hard, I think it's a hard question to answer in
mhm,
one go, but I feel like learning has to be intergenerational.
mm,
It has to be something that's done in community. I think we have to break down the barriers. Um, it's really hard for community members to get inside schools. And I
mhm,
understand that, in terms of safety, but our communities carry so much knowledge and history
mm,
and culture. But those folks are really not seen as the educators,
mhm,
right? So we need to expand ways that we think about how we're relating to people around us. And I think something else that we have to really challenge is that schools are really set up to, prepare people for work. I think that
mhm,
capitalist framework
mm,
is something that is a big problem
yeah,
because it really challenges us to think about what's the purpose of schooling? What's the purpose of our education? What are we doing all this for? Is this just to work? And if so, like, where does the human get to, engage with that?
yeah. Well, I appreciate you, hopping on Ed News and just kind of expanding and addressing your talk and your article and the article will be in the description. If you if you wrote another article, let's say in the end of this semester, what do you think it would be about?
That is a fantastic question. I haven't thought that far. I haven't thought that far ahead.
Yeah.
Um, but
What are some
I think,
highlights or things that you just see that would kind of evolve from this article?
yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting work that's being done in different communities, across the country. Um, I think in the state of Illinois, something that has been really exciting to me that I've had the opportunity to work adjacent to is that we recently developed culturally relevant teaching and leading standards
Mm.
that are going to be adapted by all of our pre-service institutions in the state. Um, I forget the year that uh, these need to be fully implemented, but they were passed in February of 2021. And so I think that framework for what we're expecting educators to be able to do, which relies heavily on the humanistic, how we humanize and how we connect with
Yeah.
one another, how we see our communities as places for possibility as opposed to
Mm.
deficits, particularly as we center the experiences of folks that have been traditionally marginalized
Mhm.
and historically marginalized in our society: Black, Brown, Indigenous, folks of color, queer folks, students with disabilities, like, centering really how we can cultivate space for those folks to thrive, I think will allow for everyone to thrive at the end of the day. And so I'm interested to see how some of this work that has started in our state might actually trickle out as we kind of push these artificial boundaries that we have called borders.
Yeah. Well, I definitely feel like 10 minutes with you is not enough, as I could learn a lot, and it seems like um, you're doing a lot, not just for your students, but for your school, and even just finding time to do articles like this. I know as a teacher, um, space and time is rare. So I really appreciate you sharing time with me on ednews.com, and really look forward to just kind of the future you continue to reimagine for all of us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm humbled to have had this chance to speak with you and folks out there.